my life, saved my soul. Left the rest far behind. This new start set me free, breaking all the chains that bind. I can't say it enough, I wouldn't be here without your love. If we watch carefully, days like this come along. Hold on tight to this life, where so much can go wrong. I can't say it enough, I wouldn't be here without your love. Can't say it enough, I wouldn't be here without your love. Can't say it enough, I wouldn't be here without your love.
We know it's a tough subject. Many people are not comfortable talking about it, or they feel like they're not qualified to talk about it. So this documentary really is sort of a tool to say, you know what? Put this in. Start that conversation. I truly believe if people knew what was left behind, they would say, no, I couldn't do this. I could not do this to my loved ones, my family, and I need to find a better way.
There's so many feelings. There's feeling lost or alone. Just my general depression in itself. Missing people. Hopeless. A bunch of feelings that run through my mind.
We are currently working with people and friends, family support, trying to get through it. Tasha's doing better, but it is a day-by-day process.
I honestly always thought I was alone. I wouldn't believe that anybody else had ever been through the things I was when I was in a bad state of mind. I thought I had it worse than everybody, and I honestly see I don't.
I'm Joanne Hoffensberger, and this is my husband, Mike.
Mike Hoffensberger. We lost our son, Shane, age 25, February 28th, 2004. He was living in Chicago in an apartment building, and he, on a Saturday, that was a Saturday morning, he jumped off the roof of his apartment building. But we never will know why.
The doorbell rang, and it was just a plain clothed gentleman that came to the door. And then he showed me his badge, told me he was from the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, and I said, oh, but he asked me where my husband was, and I said he's working out in his shop, and I said we could walk back there, and then we got in the garage, and he said, your son's Shane, and I right away thought it was a car accident, because I thought, living in Chicago, I always worried about him having a car accident.
And he told us that Shane died by suicide.
My name is Susan Marjenka, and I lost my almost 60-year-old husband to manic depression. He took his own life with a rifle in our backyard on July 21st of 2010 in the middle of an afternoon. And 3 years later, my 85-year-old mother, who had been battling depression for at least a decade, and suddenly became delusional and paranoid, hung herself in her garage.
I lost my brother to suicide 7 years ago on June 26th, 2006. I was at work and my manager had called. I was at our main office and said, Ted is on his way to pick you up, so stay there. And I thought, okay, why is Ted on his way? What happened? And so Ted pulled in and I got in the car and it just seemed really hot. And so I rolled down the window a little bit and I said, okay, what's going on? And Ted said, Peggy shot himself. And I just remember screaming no, and Ted grabbed me and just held me as I cried. And I don't remember the drive from work to home. I was just in shock.
My nephew died by suicide 2.5 years ago. He drove to a rather remote area, several hundred miles from his home. I think he did that intentionally so that his children wouldn't have to deal with his death there in the city in which they lived. And someone saw the truck parked there and heard the engine running and checked, and he was dead.
I think with suicide, for one, you can't answer the infamous question of why. If I would have stayed on the phone a little longer with that person, if I would have visited that night, this wouldn't have happened.
You're hoping that you can correct the situation and hope this isn't a completed suicide. It's kind of your first thing when you're going there, saying, I hope this really didn't happen. Because in my mindset, this is preventable. Somebody can get help for it. But with law enforcement, we are trained to kind of put your emotions on the side right when you step in the threshold of that house or right next to the park, wherever this would have happened, and then control the situation for safety of ourselves to other people and get medical attention if we have to, kind of with the protocol that we're trained to do. With the emotion part of it, we tend to start having a bond a little bit with the family as we're there talking to them and trying to answer their questions. The most questions they have is why? Why did this happen? What could we have done to prevent this? And you try to give them the best answer you can.
When I arrive at the scene that is a suicide, I first will make contact with law enforcement. They will give me the picture as the scenario as what has taken place. Recently I did have one that I did know the family. I also knew the person himself. It is very hard because you are going through the same emotions that you know the family's going through. So you help the family, you also help yourself. They need the answers as to why it happened, just like I need the answers too.
Sometimes they know, at the scene they know it was a suicide, so they're expecting that. Sometimes they don't know, and to them it looks like an accident because they just can't believe, that their son or daughter, loved one, what have you, would do such a thing. And we don't always necessarily have all the answers right away, so we have to do our investigation working with law enforcement. And it may take some time. Sometimes it takes months. Wait for toxicology, a number of things to come back. We all put together in our investigation. Sometimes there's no other justification for the death other than suicide. I think that most people, when they commit suicide or thinking about it, unfortunately they're only thinking about themselves, and they think that their family members and their parents and their brothers and their sisters, aunts and uncles, will be okay, and most of the time they're not. I mean, that is something that's going to affect the family forever, and it's not something that families take easily and take very well, and especially if they know it's a suicide. Sometimes people leave notes, sometimes they don't. In either case, whether they leave a note or not, that's not very helpful. Unfortunately, it doesn't give the families the answers that they're looking for.
And we'll never know, really, how much of this was planned. How did it affect the family? It was absolutely devastating. It was devastating to his children, his teenage sons. It was devastating to his wife. It was devastating to his father, his sister, his nieces and nephews, and of course to me and to my children, and to his friends. because we really had no idea that this was coming, and it's an incredible loss.
Well, early on in my career, I had just gotten my license. I had met with a client one time, and within that next week, he had died by suicide. So you're in shock, you're sad for the client and the family that is left behind, and there's really no literature out there on what to do to take care of yourself as a practitioner in the field.
My children were all out of state when my husband died, so I had to call and tell them over the phone. Losing Ted was awful, but making those phone calls and hearing my children hysterical at the other end of a phone and not being able to put my arms around them and comfort them was awful. That's the worst thing I think I've ever been through in my life. And I'm just grateful that they all had someone there with them when the call came in, to hang on to them.
He thought he was taking care of himself, you know, getting rid of the pain he felt inside for whatever reason, but he left everybody else in a lot of pain since then. And because Shane wouldn't have wanted his family and friends to go through what we were going through now. He wasn't that type of guy.
He was always the one that helped his friends out. So, you know, yeah. For no, you know, we really don't have an answer to why.
Why?
You know, he was always a real happy-go-lucky kid. He was my son that would walk in the house and say, "Hi, family, I'm home," or surprise us and come home from college because he knew it would make us happy. And he was just really a happy kid.
I had been suffering from depression for a long time.
How long?
Oh man, you know, it's probably a good 20 years. And I did a lot of bouncing around from this med to this med. You know, they thought I had depression, ADD. And finally, one of my doctors suggested that I might have bipolar. And I mentioned that to the doctor in the hospital, and they put me on lithium. And I responded to it. And I thought at that time, wow, after all these years of going through, you know, trying this medication and this medication, I finally figured out what was wrong with me, that I had bipolar. And I was fortunate enough, I got a job, I got, you know, my life really started to turn around, and got put on the right medication, and it was a blessing to me to finally to know that, you know, this is what you have and this is what you can do about it. And you know, really from that point on, my life started to turn around. I decided to do some soul searching and really find out why I've been put here on earth, really. And through a lot of fasting and prayer, I discovered that I was, you know, meant to be an alcohol and drug abuse counselor, specifically working with adolescents.
But there is no one cause to suicide. It's really a layering effect. It's that person's life journey. I always say suicide is like a glass of water. The water goes in drop by drop. It's that last drop of water that makes it overflow. It wasn't that last drop of water that led to the overflowing. It was all those drops prior to it. That last drop is really what spilled everything over.
There's times where we get called to attempted suicides or even suicides, and it could be ranging anywhere from one a week to it could be something along the lines of one a month. It all depends upon the economy at the time, all depends upon what's happening around in different parts of people's lives. It's something that's not predictable when it's something like that's going to happen. It's just that we respond when we're called for it. You always try to figure out, why did this person do it? It could be anywhere from the economic standpoint, losing a job, a loved one losing a job, knowing that they can't pay the bills for the house, to mental health issues. It could be to the fact of relationship issues, drug addiction, alcoholism.
It is a big concern for us as a community, and we do need to look at other ways as to seeing how this can be prevented so we don't have higher stats than what we have.
There has been some discussion about the fact that he received a head injury about a year and a half before his death. He fell, he was helping a friend on a grain elevator, and he fell and actually experienced some amnesia short term.
The reason some of these things happen is because the person is afraid to talk, afraid to express what's going on. And I really believe in this documentary that you're doing so that we can open it up and talk about it and get some of the shame and some of the negative feelings out and more of the love and empathy in.
Losing a family member to suicide leaves everyone around them with a feeling of having missed something and some sense of guilt that we weren't able to give them a reason to live, help them get through what they needed to, and that we didn't see it coming.
Joanne's dad died by suicide when she was 5. So, and you never thought of it, but after Shane died by suicide, and we did some, learn more, otherwise you never think about suicide. That happens to, poor people, people that are on drugs, people that are on alcoholics.
Trouble with the law.
Trouble with the law.
Yeah.
But then we realized that there's some genetics involved. Even though, Shane was under a lot of pressure, a lot of his guys that he went to school with, they're under the same pressures, but they can handle it because their chemical makeup, their brain chemistry is different.
In his note, he didn't give exact reasons why or anything, but he did mention that the medicine that he was on didn't make him feel like he thought he should feel. So recently divorced, possibly losing his job. He was going to school and putting himself through college. I think he just got to the point where maybe his hurt and his pain became so much so that he just needed to figure a way how to make that pain go away.
I consulted with my regular doctor, and he put me on some medication, but it was horrible for me. And it actually made things worse. And it was so bad at that time that my brain literally hurt. I couldn't do anything to shut that off. And I enjoy watching TV, I love music, and I couldn't even do that anymore. So I got to a point, because things were really starting to crash in my lifetime, in my life, that I just I hit the bottom. I hit that point, and it's hard to explain that feeling, but when I really thought about it, it's like a scary, depressing movie that runs through your head, and the only way that you can shut that off is to either sleep or to end your life. And I thought, the problem with sleep is, you're going to have to wake up and face that again. So I was very fortunate that I had some people that I scared enough in my life that wanted to do something, and they wanted to help me.
Elderly suicides has always been a high concern. People don't want to be a burden. We hear that a lot. I don't want to be a burden to my family. I don't want to have them worry about my health, or when their significant other dies. They might be struggling with mental illness. They might have some financial issues. They might have law enforcement issues. They might have peer pressures, bullying. They might have all those things combined.
They always have the number one question, why? It's always the question of, why did this happen? What could we have done? What signs could we have seen? And then all of a sudden they realize, thinking back, I missed all these signs that were happening. The fact that he or she is closing themselves in the room, they're listening to a different kind of music, they're not socializing with their friends anymore, and they're not eating, all the different signs of a suicidal person. But then all of a sudden it clicks, going, oh, and now who do they put blame on themselves? Sometimes it's themselves.
If they lose closeness with friends, if they start to isolate themselves. I know if they go from wearing short sleeves all the time to now they're in pants and long sleeves, and constantly pulling at their sleeves is a big thing I've noticed. The way their demeanor, the way they look. If you see them on a regular, you can tell their real happy versus their fake happy, their real smile versus their fake smile. And take the time to look at somebody, because it's very easy to see if you actually pay attention.
There were just so many different warning signs that we didn't know were warning signs, because again, we never researched suicide or anything. I remembered, my brother talking about his company possibly moving jobs overseas. So there was a potential for him to possibly be losing his job. He was divorced. Loved his wife. It just didn't work out, unfortunately, for his heart.
Today we even, what did we miss? Why didn't we see this coming, that he was not doing well? What could we have done differently? It's a constant, it used to be constant. That's all you thought about. Now, biggest thing, he's gone. It's not how he died anymore, it's that he's gone. And that's the biggest thing.
So it's very important, if you sense anything, even if you kind of push it to the side and don't think it's a big deal, to continue to closely monitor the situation, whether it be a son or a daughter, a spouse, a loved one, and just keep an eye on their actions and how are things going for them in general in their life, because there's so many factors that play in. Suicides happen for all different kinds of reasons, and so there's not one in particular.
We all have stresses at every age, but then how do you cope with them? How do you cope with that breakup? How do you cope with that? Maybe you have a lot of pressure and you put a lot of pressure on yourself, that perfectionism. So coping skills and resilience skills, we do a lot with our youth. And that really is suicide prevention, giving somebody the ability to cope with their everyday issues so they don't feel overwhelmed, so they don't feel like that drop of water that's going to push them over the edge.
I think the way the community can help in preventing suicide is first having an open ear to your neighbor, to the person that you might not see all the time, or to the person that might look down, kind of question, place a call. If it's to law enforcement, talk to them. Maybe they can get help through the church, through health professionals. Just don't let them be alone.
We as friends and neighbors and co-workers and family need to support that person and encourage them to talk about it, and not be afraid to say to someone, it seems like maybe you're a little depressed. Are you depressed? Are you thinking about suicide? The old myth was that if you talked about suicide, that then you would be suggesting it. Well, that's not the case.
I did not attempt suicide. I was fortunate to have people in my life that realized what was going on with me. And the thing about that is I reached out to them. And that's something I would really, really like to emphasize is that reaching out. Because if you keep that bottle up inside you, you're not going to get the help.
And we have to make people more aware that they can get help, sometimes through medication and through counseling. They can get better. They can live a happy life.
Yeah. Just tell somebody that you're not doing well.
Right.
Hopefully they can open up.
And that's why we want more people to be aware that it can happen to anybody. Nobody in 1,000 years thought Shane would die by suicide. People just still don't believe it. But it did happen.
I went through a few counselors till I found the right one. So I finally found a good one that would talk to me, and it wasn't like a sit up broad shouldered. It was, let's go for a walk. and just kind of got down on a deeper level and started off with light conversation and just kind of flowed.
You need to take the time to listen. And there's a lot of times where Tasha, even today, has to stop me and be like, Mom, just stop. Just listen. I got something I need to tell you. And she's got to kind of like, you know, and then I need to stop. Okay, what's going on? And she tells me, she gets it off her chest and she feels better.
It's extremely helpful, and the fact that once I felt comfortable talking to them, I felt like if I need something I can call them and they'll be there for me. So feeling like I have that support there really made a big difference and made me feel like I had a place.
We have a lot of good, well-trained law enforcement, well-trained nurses, well-trained mental health professionals who are there for support. And as friends and family, we need to advocate for that person and suggest that they get help.
It's much easier to talk to somebody that doesn't even know you. And that's usually tends to help people with that. So when they call the police, that's what we try to do. We're not there to punish them. We're trying to get them the help that they need. So we're trying to get them to a mental health facility, get them talking to a doctor, and find out what can be done for future help so they don't try to commit suicide again.
And how to work with them about how to have that hope, that people care, that basically suicide's not an option, period.
Being able to talk to people about it has helped, and knowing that we're not the only ones, that this has happened so many times.
When people have the issues of wanting to commit suicide, we're fortunate with this community that we have a lot of resources out there. It's just that people are afraid to use them. Am I going to have a bad standing in the community because I'm getting mental health help? No, somebody has to get help. It's a private thing. Laws protect the privacy from somebody going to the doctor and seeing them. He can't tell everybody about it. What we're looking at is somebody to get the help. It's out there. People get everything from just talking to a therapist to actually getting medications to hopefully control the urges of wanting to commit suicide.
The more that I think we have this conversation, and the more that we can see, start approaching it from the approach of then trauma-informed care, what happened to you versus what's wrong with you, I think more people will open up and we can have this conversation, and then we can learn and we can provide services in an empathetic, caring manner.
I honestly always thought I was alone. I wouldn't believe that anybody else had ever been through the things I was when I was in a bad state of mind. I thought I had it worse than everybody, and I honestly see I don't. I have problems, and I have to learn how to deal with them. Everybody else has problems, and somebody always has it worse than you and makes it. There is hope no matter how bad it might be. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to push to see it.
So my life has come full circle, you know, and it's all because I asked for help. If I would have never asked for help, I don't know where I would be, if I would be. But if you don't ask for help, you're not going to get help. There is hope. There is help available. There's people out there. There's people that you can call. There's people that you can talk to. There's suicide hotlines. There's all sorts of resources out there. You don't have to suffer alone. And you don't have to go through this. There's people that love you and care about you that will give you the help that you need.
The pulse, I feel it, it's here, believe it, I'm all moment of truth. As we stand together, we're front and center, we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Everybody on your feet! To
us here, we've made it. We've watched with bated breath. And our sweat will witness, and our strength will win this. Our tears of joy will vindicate it all. Everybody on your feet and breathe in the moment. Put your hands to your heart as we all come together. We got the fire in our eyes. We got the fire in our bones. And we will
Today is a day of awareness. And I always say with awareness, it provides opportunity. And opportunity provides change. And every single step that you make is making a change. So thank you. And I want you to each grab the person that's next to you. You don't have to know them, but we're here for all the same reason. Hold your fellow walker, and I want you to take a moment and inside have a moment of silence, reflection, thought, prayer for who we're walking for today.
You had forever after then, lost it. Now you're here with heaven in your pocket. And all those lost souls you saved. But I'm in a pretty good place. It's a great day today. Can't help yesterday. Don't know what comes next. I hope for the best. Seeing life and change in the mirror, keeping it real with much less pain and fear, trying to keep a smile on my face, still in a pretty good place. I'm sitting in a pretty good place, living in a pretty good place, being here now in a pretty good place. I'm sitting in a